the last 2 years, I've been wearing a Whoop strap, tracking my cardiovascular strain, my sleep, my recovery. So why did I stop? I can tell you it wasn't because it doesn't have a screen or you can't pay for coffees with it like an Apple Watch at the cafe. Buckled. I am fully buckled. Just went full gas for like 3 hours with Ben. So I'm going to do my best to let you know my impressions of the Whoop strap after 24 months. This is not an in-depth review. This is just me rattling off some thoughts after wearing it for so long. So basically, every bit of data that comes out of this strap is based on the heart rate that the strap reads. So logically, if the strap is reading the correct heart rate, then happy days, all is right in the world, and all the data is fairly accurate, I'd say, or really accurate. But if the heart rate monitor is not reading accurately to what's actually happening, then that's going to have knock-on effects, and everything else is going to be inaccurate. All right. So I'm going to start with the strain score that the Whoop device gives you. A strain score is a number based on 1 to 21, and the strain score is how hard you've exerted yourself. To get to a 21, it's impossible. You have to sustain a maximum heart rate for 24 hours. So nobody can do that, or at least I don't think anyone can do that without dying. So 21 is impossible, but you can get pretty close. Like I've scored like a 20.5 on really long rides, but ultimately that's where I think the problems start to arise. So when I'm out riding, and everything I'm talking about in this video is through the lens of an endurance cyclist who does between 10 to 15 hours a week. I'm noticing that the higher your heart rate gets, the more inaccurate this device gets when compared to a Wahoo heart rate monitor and a Garmin heart rate monitor. So naturally, if the Whoop is saying 130 beats a minute, but my Wahoo is saying 180 beats a minute because I'm powering up a hill and I know that I'm exerting myself and I know my heart rate's high, and this thing's reading 130 for 5 minutes, then the strain score is going to be inaccurate that it gives me at the end. On the other hand, if the Whoop is telling me I'm doing 180 beats, but I'm casually cruising down the street at 120 beats, then I'm thinking, what is going on? John Odoms also had a Whoop strap, had a similar sort of issue. He messaged Whoop about this. They just said, hey, why don't you tighten the strap a little bit? Or they send out a new strap and, the same sort of heart rate monitor reading issues arise. That is probably just one of the downfalls in technology when you're wearing a wrist-based heart rate monitor. I also find the same with my Apple Watch. Occasionally, if I will use that on a Strava run or a Strava ride, I'm noticing the heart rate is wildly inaccurate compared to the chest-based heart rate monitors. So I'm only finding this at really high heart rates that the inaccuracies tend to arise, and the heart rate gap between an accurate heart rate monitor and a wrist-based increases more and more. So let's talk strain score and how that is not really applicable for an endurance-based cyclist, or what I think anyway. You can go do a 1.5 hour super intense ride, get a strain score of something like 20 on the Whoop, or you can go do a 4 hour really easy endurance ride and get a strain score of 20 again, even though you're not that physically exerted after the really long, low intense endurance ride. So your TSS score, which is based on a function of your power meter and a more accurate heart rate monitor, will give you different values, and they will be more accurate to what you actually underwent during that training session. So for the really intense training session, you may get a TSS score of 150 in that hour and a half, 2 hours. And then for the really low intense long endurance ride of say 3 to 4 hours, you may only get a TSS score of around 100. One is definitely less than the other. However, the Whoop strain score is telling you you're getting something similar. And I do believe that's not really that valuable. At least I didn't find it really valuable. If you're not an endurance-based cyclist, hey, the strain score may work really well for you. Let's talk about recovery. It's the reason why I got the Whoop strap. It's the reason why I think most other people have gotten a Whoop strap. They really want to delve into the nitty-gritty of recovery, how they can sleep better, how they can improve it, how they can feel better. And I just want to start this section by saying that I don't think I've ever been able to get the quantity of recovery that Whoop has asked me to get based on my strain scores. But nevertheless, every day after you wake up, you get a recovery score. It's a value between 0 and 100%, 100 being the best. 0, I don't even know if you can score that, but you'd probably feel like you're on your deathbed. For example, after a big night out, I get maybe a recovery score of like 2% to 13, 14%, and I'm feeling lousy. So I'd say that the recovery score that the Whoop gives you aligns most of the time with how you're feeling. I'd say there are 2 really valuable insights that the Whoop has given me in this whole recovery space. Number 1 is being able to change certain lifestyle factors one by one and seeing how they directly impact your recovery. So, for example, every night you may choose not to look at screens for the last 30 minutes before you go to bed. And every morning after you get your recovery score from Whoop, you can write a little note. Oh, I didn't look at a screen for 30 minutes before I go to bed. And this becomes an automated process that has a bunch of different categories and criteria that you can choose from that changes that you make in your lifestyle. And then over time, you can actually see the trends of if these lifestyle changes are actually making a difference in your recovery. So I tried everything from ibuprofen to magnesium to stretching to meditating to writing down if I've had a stressful day, not a stressful day, if I have felt satisfied that day, not satisfied that day, a host of different things. And you learn a lot about yourself. For example, if I take a Nurofen 2 hours before I go to bed and some biomagnesium, on average, I'm going to score a recovery score that's a couple % higher than if I didn't. And this is all graphed out for you really nicely in weekly performance assessments and monthly performance assessments where you can really dive into what worked and what didn't work. And this is where all the magic is, in my opinion. Okay, I actually butchered the second point the original time I said it, so I'm going to try and say it again. The second thing I find really valuable is separating how you feel in the morning with what the Whoop data is actually telling you. So what do I mean by that? You may feel a bit tired, a bit groggy. In the morning you think, oh man, I'm not feeling that great. But the Whoop is actually saying that, hey, you're real fresh, you're ready to go. And that is a really valuable piece of data because then you can go out and structure your training based on the metrics that the Whoop gave you and not just how you solely feel in that, say, 30 to 40 minute window on waking up. So you can go out for PBs that day. You can go out for that really hard training session. And if the Whoop is reading accurate, then you're literally making the most of your physiological condition based on the figures that the Whoop is giving you. Did that make sense? I hope it did. On the other hand, if you wake up feeling pretty good, you think, oh, it's just another good day. But your Whoop metrics are saying, hey, they're not so good. You may have a really low HRV, a high resting heart rate, and then you go do your exercise as usual. You're going to push through the efforts like you usually do, but for some reason you can't sustain the high intensities that you usually can. Well, then it really does prove the point that the Whoop metrics have some validity and you may want to take it easy that day. You may be coming down with something. It really allows you to structure your training according to what the Whoop data is telling you. By far, my favorite piece of data is heart rate variability. It really tells me personally when I can push and when I probably shouldn't push and get rest and recovery. So what are my conclusions after running a Whoop strap for like the last 24 months? I think the idea is straight gold, but the inaccuracy of the device is definitely what's letting it down for me. However, I would still totally recommend a Whoop strap for anyone out there that's on the borderline or wants to get one, or even if you don't think you need one, there are things you can learn from this. I think a 6-month subscription is what people should start with because 80% of what I learned with this strap, I learned in the first 6 months. Tinker, and figure out what changes in your lifestyle are actually making a difference to your recovery scores and your quality of life. There is no other device out there that I know of that does it as effectively as Whoop. You had a Whoop strap all that time ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
Ultimately, why did you get rid of it? By the way, hint, that's the topic of today's video.
Yeah, guessing. I think the data I had kind of, once I understood it, it's like, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It was interesting to see, like if I eat red meat, like bad sleep.
Really?
If I had a steak, you could tell, like you could look at the data and be like, oh, I'm sure I had a big steak that night.
Yeah.
But I don't know. That was about it, and then I just didn't want to pay the subscription.
That's a valid reason. When you're cancelling, it's like, what are the reasons you're cancelling? And then like one of the very top ones is like too expensive or something, or like too much money. And I'm like, fair enough. Yeah, it's if you don't get a 12-month subscription and you pay month to month, it's like $44 a month. It's more than Netflix.